Hi folks, HR Funk here, with the second video in my series on transitioning my duty pistol to the use of a micro red dot optic sight. Now if you saw my last video, you know that I focused on this pistol, which is going to be my platform for making this transition, and this is my Smith&Wesson Performance Center M&P C.O.R.E, and as I said during that video, this is a C.O.R.E pistol, C.O.R.E standing for Combat Optics Ready. What I'm going to do in this video is discuss the sight that I'm going to be using and actually installing it on the pistol. As I work my way through this, I also want to talk about some of the things that have come to light with regard to some support equipment, like holsters, that I've discovered along the way that I'm going to need in order to actually use this as a duty pistol. And without further ado, this is the optic that I've chosen to use on my pistol. This is the Leupold DeltaPoint Pro, and the one that I selected specifically is the one with the 7.5 minute of angle delta or triangle shaped reticle. And I'll explain why it is that I chose that particular reticle and this particular sight, but first I'm going to go over installation on my pistol. Now there is an issue you need to know about if you're considering using an M&P C.O.R.E pistol and the Leupold DeltaPoint Pro. When you purchase a C.O.R.E M&P, they come with several mounting plates for a variety of different red dot optic sights. One of them is the original Leupold DeltaPoint, which is no longer in production. Leupold has replaced that with the DeltaPoint Pro. Unfortunately, that mounting plate that comes with the C.O.R.E pistols does not quite match up with the DeltaPoint Pro sight. They've changed it slightly and now it doesn't work right. So in order to use your DeltaPoint Pro sight with an M&P C.O.R.E pistol, you do have to purchase a separate mounting plate from Leupold, which is another $40 or so that you have to spend in order to mount this optic to your pistol. Now, as I understand it, there is a way to modify the sight and the original DeltaPoint mounting plate in order to get it to work with the C.O.R.E, but I didn't want to go through all that. I wanted something that I could just bolt on to my pistol and not have to modify anything. So I spent the extra money and got the additional mounting plate. Now, as I go over the installation on the pistol, you'll see that everything should mount up very well and very easily. And once I finish that, I'll discuss the sight a little bit more in detail and again explain why it is I chose this particular optic. And here we go. The first thing I'm going to do is remove this cover from the slide. In order to do that, I need a 5/64 hex head wrench, and I'm just going to remove these bolts. And then remove the cover itself. This exposes the top of the slide where we're actually going to attach our mounting plate. And here we go with the actual installation of our sight. This is the Leupold mounting plate, and you can see that it has screw holes that match up with the holes in the top of the slide. And it installs just like that, and you can see the little tabs that actually made up with the sight are pointing up. The shorter screws or bolts are the ones that are going to attach the mounting plate to the slide, and they do come with thread locker already on there, so that's kind of nice. And I'm going to get them started with the Torx wrench that comes with the mounting plate, and I'll finish this up with my torque wrench because the instructions do say that you should torque these screws down to 18 to 20 inch-pounds. So that's what I'm going to do. And now I'll switch over to my torque wrench. And both screws are now properly torqued, so I can move on to attaching the sight itself. And here is the DeltaPoint Pro that we're going to be installing to the mounting plate. You can see on the bottom where these tabs mate with the bottom of the sight. I'm going to put it on just like that. And again, these screws are supplied with the mounting plate, but there was another set that also came with the sight itself. So if you don't happen to be using one of the M&P C.O.R.E pistols that has this particular mounting plate, it does come with its own screws, so you can mount it to whatever pistol you might be using. And these also have the thread locker already installed. So again, I will get these started with the supplied Torx wrench here. And the instructions say that these screws should be torqued to 25 inch-pounds. So I've increased the torque on my wrench to that level. And I'm just going to tighten these. And they are both now properly torqued. One thing to be aware of with the DeltaPoint Pro and the M&P C.O.R.E pistols, as you can see, the rear sight is not high enough to be able to actually co-witness over the rear of the sight. This was something I knew about when I got the sight. It's something I plan on dealing with in my training, so I was not particularly concerned about that when the sight arrived, and I put everything together as I just have, and we can see that we are not going to be able to co-witness with that rear sight. Okay, so why did I choose the Leupold DeltaPoint Pro as the micro red dot optic for my new duty pistol? Actually, there's a variety of reasons, beginning with the reason that I'm looking at installing a red dot optic at all on my duty pistol, and I mentioned this in the last video. That is because at my current age, at 52 years old, I'm starting to lose a little bit of my visual acuity. When I shoot with iron sights, the front sight particularly is looking a little bit fuzzy, and I feel like I'm losing a little bit of my accuracy. So I'm hoping the installation of a red dot optic will help with that and allow me to continue shooting as quickly and accurately as I did when my eyes were younger. When I made the decision that I wanted to explore the option of a red dot optic, I began to research pretty much every optic out there. In fact, I was able to go to a local store who sells these optics and look at just about every site from every major manufacturer who's currently producing a micro red dot optic. Through all the research that I did, it really looked like there were only two sites that currently are viable options for a duty weapon. Basically, two sites that have evolved to the point where you can rely on them enough to trust them in that capacity. And that is the Leupold DeltaPoint Pro and the Trijicon RMR. When I compared the DeltaPoint Pro to the RMR, there were pluses and minuses for both sites, but there were more features that I liked with the DeltaPoint Pro than I did with the RMR. Now, one of the reasons I like the Leupold DeltaPoint Pro is because I've had a professional relationship with Leupold for over 20 years. I've been using their products in my job as a law enforcement sniper, as a police officer, and I've actually been using them as a competitive marksman for a number of years, and even in the hunting field. I trust Leupold optics. I've had the opportunity to work back and forth with their customer service folks. In fact, when I was researching this optic, I called Leupold and discussed some of my concerns with one of their customer service reps who actually uses one of these optics in competition. And I was able to get some information from him to help ease my mind. One of the things I was concerned about was battery life. And that's also something I want to watch closely as I start to use this sight and see just how long the battery is going to last. But when it comes to the features that I liked about the DeltaPoint Pro that helped really push me toward purchasing this optic, it begins with the size of the lens. When I look through the lens of the DeltaPoint Pro, this is one of the largest lenses currently available on a micro red dot optic. And I think that's important for a handgun that's going to be used for defensive applications, because if I have to use this pistol to defend myself or to defend someone else, chances are it's going to be a close range encounter in a very rapidly moving scenario, which means I've got to get this pistol up, see through this lens, find my dot, and put effective shots on target as quickly as possible. So I don't want to have a small lens that I have to move my head around or my eyes around to try to find just the right place to look through it. And that's also the reason that I chose the 7.5 minute of angle Delta style reticle as opposed to the, I believe it's a 2.5 MOA round dot that also comes in the DeltaPoint Pro, because I don't want to be looking around in this window and trying to find a very small dot in that scenario that I just laid out a moment ago. I want something that as I bring this up, it's big, it's easy to see, and again, I can start to place those effective shots on target. Now at this point, some of you may be saying, but wait a minute, what if you have to make a very precise shot? Now you've got that big 7.5 MOA delta-shaped reticle out there in front of you. That's true, but I think because of the shape of the delta, because of the triangle, when I zero this optic, I'm going to zero it so the bullet strikes at the very top, the very point of the triangle. That way, if I have to make a very precise shot, I can use that delta-shaped reticle just like I do the front sight and place a very precise shot on target. Now, as long as I mentioned zeroing a minute ago, I should probably point out that I had a viewer who sent me a message saying he used a DeltaPoint Pro on a Smith&Wesson C.O.R.E. and he was not able to zero the optic. It always hit high for him. In fact, he said at 25 yards he was hitting about 4 inches high. Because of the offset of this sight above the bore axis, I'm expecting to see a mechanical offset or a deviation in my point of impact similar to what I see with an AR-15, although probably not as much deviation as with an AR-15, because this sight is not as far over the bore axis as the sights on an AR-15 are. But I do expect to see some of that, and that's another thing that I want to look at when I zero this optic. Probably more so than with iron sights, which are closer to the bore axis. I'm expecting that I'm going to have to zero this sight for a specific distance and understand that when I'm closer to the target than that zero distance, I'm going to hit lower, and when I'm farther away, I'm going to hit higher. Now, I have been running some numbers through my ballistic programs, and it looks like if I zero this pistol at 12 yards, I shouldn't hit any more than about a half-inch low from 4 yards out to that 12 yards, where of course it'll hit dead on. And all the way out to 50 yards beyond that, I should not deviate more than a half-inch above or below my line of sight. So I am going to start out zeroing this optic for 12 yards, and then I'll fine-tune it from there if I need to. But that's where I intend to start it. If I have the optic sighted in for 12 yards, and I shoot at 7 yards, I'm going to hit about 1/4 of an inch or a little over 1/4 of an inch low. So when I do my tack driving test with this optic out at the range, I'm going to have to aim just above that tack to see if I can drive it. Beyond that, there are some other features with the DeltaPoint Pro. It has 8 intensity settings for the reticle, so I can either take the intensity down or take it up, a total of 8 settings. In order to do that, I just press the power button and it will either increase or decrease, and if I'm decreasing and I want to increase or vice versa, I simply hold the power button down for 2 seconds and then push the button and it will go the opposite direction from the direction it was going before. Also, my power button is my on-off switch, or maybe I should say that intensity button is my on-off switch. I can press that and hold it and either turn the optic on or turn the optic off. It also has motion sensor technology. If the pistol doesn't move or the sight doesn't move for a period of 5 minutes, it powers itself off. But then any movement in the pistol or the sight turns it back on. That's a feature to help save the battery. Now this is something, since this is going to be a duty pistol, there aren't going to be many times through my shift that it's going to be completely motionless. I'll be turning, moving, or doing whatever, and that's one of the reasons I was somewhat concerned about the battery life in this particular optic. That was actually one of the strong points with the Trijicon. They have a battery life that is much, much, much longer than the DeltaPoint Pro. But I think I'm just going to have to be very diligent when it comes to monitoring this battery and changing it when it needs to be changed. It does let you know when the battery is getting low. It will start to flash. When you see that reticle flashing, you have a few hours left of battery life before it will completely go dead. And during that time, I need to have a new battery installed. So what I'm going to do is keep a supply of these batteries handy, and whenever I notice that flashing begin, I'll swap out the new battery for the old battery, and I should be okay. And that's another strong point for the DeltaPoint Pro. Changing the battery is very easy. All you have to do is move the small latch to the side, which allows the battery compartment to open. There's a magnet attached to the cap of the battery compartment, which actually raises the battery itself up out of the compartment. It's then very easy to remove and put the new battery in, close everything back up, and you're ready to go. Another thing I like about the DeltaPoint Pro are the adjustment screws for elevation and windage settings. They are adjustable in 1 minute of angle increments, and they're located at the rear of the sight body, where they should be very easy to adjust when I get out to the range. And I like the aluminum housing that guards the lens. Again, this is a duty pistol, so it's going to be subject to all the abuse and bumps and bruises of any other duty pistol, and it's important to have something, I believe, to protect that lens. The lens itself has multiple scratch-resistant coatings, and again, this is going to be out in all kinds of different elements, subject to all kinds of different conditions, and I think those scratch-resistant coatings are going to be very important. If you look closely at the DeltaPoint Pro, you'll also notice that the lens is set significantly back behind the forward edge of the aluminum guard. So any sort of racking of the slide that needs to be done, if the sight is going to be used for that, the lens is protected. I think this is another important feature. And last but not least, the electronic components of the sight are backed by a 2-year warranty from Leupold, and the rest of the sight, the non-electronic parts, are subject to Leupold's lifetime warranty. The last thing I want to talk about in this video is some of the support gear you have to consider if you're thinking about transitioning to a micro red dot optic for your duty weapon, whether it's a Leupold DeltaPoint Pro or any of the other ones. One of the things I already mentioned, and that is batteries, and I plan to keep a stockpile of the batteries for the DeltaPoint Pro on hand, so if I need to switch out the battery when I see that reticle start to flash, I have them handy and I can do that. Another consideration is your duty holster. And I have my duty holster here, if I can keep from dropping it. And this pistol fits this holster until you install the sight. Once the sight is installed, it absolutely is not going to fit in there. Now what I've discovered is that there are a lot of holsters that will accommodate a pistol with a micro red dot optic attached to it when you're looking for concealed carry holsters or you're looking at competition holsters. But there are not many holsters appropriate for duty use that you can use with your pistol once you install the micro red dot. So that's the video for today. In the next segment, we'll head out to the range, I'll zero the pistol, and I'll start to do some shooting with it and see how it's going to perform with the DeltaPoint Pro mounted. I'll also introduce you to that new holster that I'm going to be using. If you have any questions or comments on this video, as always, be sure to leave those below. And until next time, good shooting. Bye-bye.